Okay, Janan, first of all, you have to upload a PDF file where all your, different sketches are combined together into a single document. So please don't upload a zip file with separate JPEGs again. It just makes it difficult for me to open and check out. Now, when I look at the works that you did, I think especially this idea I found very interesting. These kind of Pac-Man looking things, they could work, but you have to really turn them into a logo. Right now, they're too much like cartoons. The things that you have here don't really have a visual identity right now. I'm not sure. Of course, you can come up with something if you keep working on it, but here there's an opportunity that's kind of really special to your initials, the C and the E, and how they kind of can be combined like a puzzle. It could work in such a more organic or circular, let's say, way, or it could be more geometrical, like you're showing me here. Although right now, none of these are fully finished versions, so I can't really say go ahead with this one or this one. But the idea is there, so depending on your likes and your own identity, you might decide that you want to go ahead with this more circular piece that kind of looks more like cookies, or this one that looks more like razors. So they kind of give off different identities, like I said, your choice. But looking at this, I also thought that here's another opportunity. Right now, the C that you're using is too elongated, too thin. But there is the opportunity here. For example, you could have had a much, oops, sorry, could have had a much better C. So it made a, sorry, it made a circle, but let me try to draw second one in it then. So imagine that your C is much thicker like that. Anyway, I'm hoping that you get what I mean, because it's really hard to annotate with this one. And the E could fit into that area much better. Right now, the E is the major part, while the C is just like, seems like the background. They could have a more equal balanced weight in the overall logo. There is a really nice opportunity as well. Like I said, so you could go with this one. You could figure out if you want to play with this kind of a puzzle idea, and that these two would be my main suggestion. But if you really want to create this like more comical feel like the Pac-Man, like these details are too, you could use this on the cover of the portfolio. It would be okay with such jokes, but the logo itself has to be here, and these are just too many illustrative details there to act as a logo. Okay, good luck. Next comes Nurdide. So just a moment, let me go over all the stuff before I begin. Now, this one, I don't know if you remember the lecture I gave. It really is very similar to one of the identities that I showed in class. So, of course, there might be some identities that resemble each other, but if we actually do realize that they do, I think it's a better idea to stay away from it. So I'm not sure. Okay, this is the okay. Here now I'm reading it. Sorry. So the idea of the eye could be something very interesting. I think the meaning of your name is also very nice. So you could actually create a quite a striking emblem out of it with Nurdide Önder written underneath in a really nice way. But right now, these eyes, I feel that, and these ones also, the outline doesn't really fit visually well with the kind of a painterly effect you're creating here. I think you can find out a more effective eye emblem for yourself, because some of these things have too much of an Egyptian look to it. Some of them look like pearls inside of a shell, so not really an eye. So I'm not sure what it will be like, but the eye is an effective image. So of course that it will be effective to have it as an emblem, but you have to figure out an eye that really looks like your own special design, not anyone else's. So I don't think that these are working. Using your own handwriting, why not? It could be interesting if this is indeed your handwriting or not a typeface. So if you use the typeface right directly, I don't think that's a really good idea. But anyway, here it creates a confusion whether I should read Nurdide or Nurlile. So the idea of the D and the L are a bit confused. I wouldn't use this shape then. Kind of a shadow effect is very interesting actually. But again, a kind of a confusion happens whether I should read them as Bibe, Dide. So it's a risky thing to do, I think. But maybe it's because you're making use of this weird letter. Maybe that's why. Maybe if you had a different type of a D here, it wouldn't be that problematic. So an interesting idea. And the visual look of especially this one, I mean, because it's more kind of fitting to create that kind of a logo, I think. I like the visual look of this one. But here is the problem. You know that if you use this, you have to somehow write your full name somewhere. So you have to write Nurdide Önder. And the way this one goes down, like here, is gonna create a problem for you to where to place that logo type. Because this is not really a logo type, because I'm not able to read everything. So, and there will also be the repetition of Nur and then Nurdide again written a second time. So I'm not sure, this is gonna be much harder to solve, I'm afraid. So let's move on up. This is a nice emblem. It could work. You have to get much thicker. That's the main issue here. I would go like twice this thickness, I think. Think about colors, what they could be. Think about whether you can actually make this space less. So this actually maybe comes down here and then goes up. So overall, it takes less space. So it's less of a longer rectangle, but maybe it ends here. I think it could work. Think of whether you could use gradients in here so that I focus more on that diagonal slash that makes the D. Could also work. Here I read a B more than a D, so I think this is much better. But like I said, I mean, the idea is really good. The visual, I mean, these are not the alternatives I would like to see when it's digitized. So I can see you trying the different endings, but for example, if you have that angle, why not finish this same parallel angle as well? I want to see that. But I think my main issue is that I want this to be more condensed mainly. Now you have an interesting thing here as well, but of course I kind of want to switch the order. So start with the N and then end with the O. Wouldn't it work? I mean, couldn't you have the N start here, go there, and then... yeah, of course it doesn't do the same thing. But yeah, you have the reverse. And the reverse can also work. You know what? We don't really care about being able to read everything. So could be. You can also maybe make use of a smaller N. I wonder if it would work. Why not? I mean, we would go like that and then curve. That might also be an idea. If I were you, I would consider it. So, like I said, I mean, I actually like how you tried to work this one out. It's just too similar to what I've shown. That's why I'm not really sure about it. Okay, so I'm coming back to those ideas. So, again, there's always the risk of B. Although here I can and U. So you're also creating a U here. And I've been reading U in all of these things, which is a problem. So it should be N and O. So I think these are not really solving your problem, but maybe you can find a different way of giving me an idea, because I mean graphically you're really working really nicely with all of them. It's just maybe you shouldn't be cutting them up. Here's an idea. Maybe you need to use the diagonal slash of the N somehow to give me not the small N but the majuscule, the caps N. Could be a way. I'm sorry I wasn't able to tell you go ahead with this one, because there are possibilities in many of them, but they all require the same amount of additional work. So I would suggest that you don't go on working in all of them, but pick one, and really the one that you like the most, and try to solve that one. Good luck. The next is ÖzgeA. So ÖzgeA. Overall, I think the major thing that you have tried is a kind of a face. So I'm guessing that you want kind of a more joyful fun looking thing, like with a character, let's say. So I see those faces here, and same here. These are a bit more serious, although not all of them. Some of them are really cute. And then you have the more serious stuff. I think really the taste and the quality, the graphical quality that I see in those pages is lacking in these digital versions. These are very thin, and as I mentioned in the lecture, thin lines are always risky. They create problems both in terms of printing and in the digital screen as well, and they lack the forcefulness of such marks. So, and these are also like kind of a bit boring, I would say. So not as interesting as the initial ones I've seen, although I really like this one. So that one, like before I focus on the previous ones, let me just go over this. These are, I mean, things I've seen before, so they've been used a lot. But this is really different, and it really belongs to you, I think. So what you need to be careful about is, this bottom line. I think your A, K should be sitting on that line. Right now it's too much up. So just like you have the dots, instead of having that kind of a che, you can put just a small dot there. You can even put the dot inside of the C, so that to have a full flat line at the bottom. You should be careful about the space you have here and the space you have here. If they can somehow be equal, then that would really be good. So with this typeface, maybe you're not able to achieve it. Well, check out different typefaces. The O that you have here doesn't have to be the same as this typeface. So it would be perfect if you can have a good square here and that this text actually fits perfectly in the middle of it with the same distances. And when I look at this, I kind of wish to have a different shape for these dots, round shapes, or maybe even if you have a square, I wish you would cut up these corners to kind of parallel the curve of the O. So play with them. This is a very, very minimalistic kind of a emblem and logo. So you have to really work hard on those small details. Maybe these are going to be much bigger, and then if they become much bigger, they will suddenly create a connection to those things you have here. Now, this idea of how you can play with the dots, I would also, what I said also apply here. Does it really have to be so high up? Or could you also try once, just like this circle relates to this, you might have circles that relates to that larger circle. So different ways of approaching it. So which one you're gonna pick? Many of them are so interesting. I'm having a hard time. I wouldn't pick the ones where you actually place the same empty space unless you want to use two separate colors, because this starts to become like a T or something. But right here I see the A much better, or I don't even care about seeing the A. I see a face, a fun looking face, which is more interesting. And then, I mean, this rather than this, I think, if I'm going to read the A, is more interesting anyway, in terms of an overall look. So, yeah, those are the ones that I enjoy the most, I think. You have many very interesting ideas, but for example, when things are much better grouped together, I enjoy them more. But in this one, this kind of a leg of the A, it looks like it's gonna fall down, so the balance is not working. That's why these are much more interesting. I mean, for example, you see how the eye has been cut here. It's probably just by mistake, but it adds a fun thing when the dots are not the same. You can even play with those things. It starts to give an expression to the face. I mean, even this on its own is really fun, but of course it's maybe too simplistic for these things. So I really enjoyed all those trials you did. Like these empty spaces are too much. If when it's just one, it's I think better. Or when it's kind of outside of it. These are very interesting as well, but I think they're also again very linear, very thin. So I'm not picking them. So actually, the ones that I'm picking on are the ones that I think are the ones that have the most potential. But you might have another one that's your favorite, so you might try to make it a bit. I mean, you might keep working on that one then. Good luck. Next one is idilE. Okay, let me open up this. So idilE. When I checked, like I read what you wrote, so I'm not really sure whether you want. Are you going to have two separate logos then for those two different things, or just your way of thinking of I could go with this or I could go with that. Okay, I'm going to talk about all of them anyway. Let's not do any of these. I think they look too much like, you know, pills, hap, kapsüller. But here you have something I think very interesting. This is too much. These are not that interesting, a bit very static and kind of boring, but this is the way you are using the diagonal lines, it makes it dynamic. It's so very interesting. I really enjoyed this thing, but of course I really want to see it with much, much thicker lines. So, I mean, imagine how it would be. Let me try to annotate and show. Just a moment. So let's erase this one. I wonder how they would be if we had those thicknesses there. It could even be much more thicker. I mean, let's see. Start digitizing this and try to see how it would be. So the moment you start to add thickness, how this edge is going to end will also be different. I mean, is it going to be like, oops, sorry. So let me draw it like that. Is it going to be, for example, like this annotate tool is really awful. Sorry about that. Is it going to be like this? Or is it going to be curvy? Is it going to be horizontal? Many options are there. Are some of them going to touch each other? Because here there's, for example, a connection. Maybe there might be other connections. Maybe this eye is a bit too separate. But I like it. Is this the dot of the eye? Is it going to be maybe the same length as the E? Is it going to be perfectly parallel to it? Is it going to be half of it? Where exactly is it going to start? All these tiny decisions. Maybe that small line is the same as that small line. This is how they connect. I mean, there is a lot of potential here. I would work on it. The other, this cardinal idea, you have worked on it so well. I'm really happy to see the way you have progressed. And many of them are interesting. I mean, this one is interesting. This one is really interesting. So these both could become something, I think. Let me read it. So what you need to do here, so this in itself is already kind of finished. I don't think you need to see the line here. You can actually leave it empty because the rest would probably give me a sense of circle. So we'll see it much better when it's digitized. I think this has gonna be, I mean, we don't recognize the bird at all. Maybe you don't need to, you don't want to, it's okay, but I think this one is very similar, but it's working much better. So with this one, for example, since this is like the red is such an important thing, what I would suggest you do is where it's white now, I think it should be red, and this should be empty, like the white, background should be visible from there. So the one part that I think you need to work on is this thing. So this curve is coming perfectly. It needs to make a reverse curve here, and I think you need to play with like a better circle there to create how it's gonna be cut in. Just like you're cutting up the circles here, here, or here, you have to work what type of a curve, how big of a curve. Maybe it can even come in that much, so that maybe this inner circle can be smaller. This tiny triangle that you're putting there is maybe too tiny. I think to have a meaning visually and to also work when you make this logo much smaller, you need to make that larger. And also this line, I think, is very thin right now. It needs to be maybe twice its size. So check out how it's gonna come and connect to here. And by the way, when this part is red and like the black parts are actually transparent parts, cut up parts, then you will see you can actually have two separate colors, like two shades of red, or red and maybe the black. So this has again so much potential. Now I wouldn't suggest to go with this one because right now you are further away from solving this idea. It looks like so many other stuff. The thing that I see here is that I think you have done a much better job here, a much more interesting thing here. And there's an idea here as well. So you shouldn't be working on so many ideas anywhere. I suggest that you pick one of them for next time and you work on it, and don't divide your time working on all of them. Maybe some of them you'll use afterwards. So if you're going to play with the idea of the brain, I like the human face. I mean, its angle, whether the nose is going to be here or whether it's going to be a bit higher up, you can play with them. Um, but I think the proportion of the brain, placement of the brain, you need to work it out a little better. So first of all, I think it needs to create a bit more, it needs to have a bit more emptiness around it. So see, even that drawing, so you need to fit it into that circle. Otherwise, we never recognize it as a brain. It takes up too much time, so we lose the idea of the profile as well. And when I'm drawing it like that, I'm also creating more of a space between the outer line and this dot, which is required. You're getting too close to the sides. So this is interesting, but I think another thing you could also do is to really make it feel like a brain. These three initials could have maybe a bit more curves. That would give us the sense of, you know, the curvature of the brain, so it would work better. You have really nice ideas and you have worked really well, so up to you now to pick one and to digitize and keep working on it. Good luck. Next, Hilal. So Hilal, I think you need to think a bit differently, or I mean, visually, you have to work with your visuals a bit differently, because right now, actually, none of these examples are close to becoming a logo. There are, like, I think there's a bit of a potential in what you're doing here, but this is really like a interesting illustration, a very stylistic illustration, but I don't think that we could count this as a logo. Anyway, it's too complicated. I spent a lot of time and effort trying to understand what I'm seeing there, and then I said, ah, this is an H and a B apparently, but it's just because I wanted to see it that I did see it, so not really working. These are, I mean, okay, you can you can go with an idea like that. So these are kind of different versions of the same idea of this way of writing, a kind of a messy, broken, free way of writing your name. But so to achieve that, this is actually much harder to work on than on a geometrical stuff. You have to do many different versions so that you can pick the one that's working much better. Because right now, this is really, there are so many frustrating things about this. The way two separate kind of square-like things are adjoining to become an H is really weird. I mean, changes in the thicknesses are weird. This huge negative space that you have, this huge L that you have versus a much smaller L, they're really, I mean, all of these, okay, I can see that you are trying to always use the same elements to create maybe the parts, but it's changing every time anyway. So forget about that, because you're trying to fake the idea of consistency, but it's not really consistent. So either pick a marker in your hand and freely actually draw by hand different things here and different ways, pages and pages of different way of writing your name in a much freer way, maybe using triangles, maybe just using lines. And then among all these freely made, like more expressive text, then you pick one, and then if you like, you frame it, or if you like, you don't, or if you like, you use its empty spaces. But right now, these are not functioning as a identity and a logo. So in order for it to look professional, this free-flowing thing is not what's making it unprofessional. These kind of identities do exist, and there are very successful examples of them, but they have been designed with very a lot of attention to all the small details, all the closeness of the letters to each other, the sizes, the exact shapes, and so on. Here there is an interesting thing. So because this is very different than what you have here and what you have here, this is a fully different approach. So which one is which one you want to use, I cannot decide. I just talk about each one on how to make it better. This separation here is, I think, waking this thing up. This is a correct one. So you should be working on this. But when you work on this, what you need to do, maybe you need to look at a few alternatives. Let me try to draw. So what if I start I think you shouldn't be touching everything. Maybe I start here, I come and do the H, and then okay, maybe this one goes. Maybe I don't touch here and I go like that. Here's one option, for example. Maybe another option could be okay, what could it be? I come here, I go here. Maybe I don't touch the B, but the B does this. Oops. Maybe the B does something like this. So another idea, maybe you have those lines, but imagine that those lines are going to be actually like empty space. You have an outer ellipse actually that is maybe I don't know, a color without an outline, and then you actually maybe let me draw with white on top of it. Sorry. And maybe on it you start to draw. I can't draw on it, sorry, but maybe on it you actually cut this one up to create the H, the B. So you have empty spaces that enter from here to create the H, and then maybe to create the B. And by those cuts you would be maybe also cutting up this ellipse into 3 parts that you could also color in different colors, or maybe they can be watercolor if you like to add other textures. So there's a fully graphical logo idea here that could work. I think you can't forget about this, and if you want to go with a more expressive free hand-drawn thing, actually do it by drawing by hands. So good luck. And the final one in this group is Merve. So let me zoom in. Merve, I don't really understand the meaning of having those 2 lines separating from the others. So what does it mean? Because you're making them pop, so we focus on this. Should I be reading 2? Should I be reading the pose sign, you know, like the play and pose, but the proportions are not correct. So this might be an idea. You might decide to say that I'm actually going to make these thick enough to really look like the pose sign, and I'm gonna work the rest of the thicknesses accordingly, because I think when you have such thin things they suddenly become thicker, it doesn't look good. So I think they can be the same thickness, but those will just be different color to pop up. And it can work if you want to say I'm gonna stop time. I mean, this is kind of pause and have a look. Maybe you want to say something like that. Then this idea could work. Let me go on. I think just to use M and K in such a regular fashion is not really working, especially when you put the M in that way. We start to read it as E. We start to read them as N, M, A. So okay, I see that you keep trying to use these 2 initials, but these are, let's say, they're just trials and they're not really working. Here you could of course use a circle, and I think this NMK, although it might be confused as C, but it won't, because you will also be writing your name, so it will work. If you want to use the circle, my suggestion is that you first of all make these ones much thicker, and maybe you don't make them that horizontal, but maybe give them a bit more height so that they fill up a bigger space within the circle. I'm not saying go to the edges. I think where they start and end are good, but I want them to cover a bit of a thicker, larger space, higher space. It would be much better. Then, so whether you're going to use a kind of an outline or whether you're going to fully fill up this circle and have these shapes as cutouts that show the background can also be an interesting thing. When you're going to write industrial design here, I think you're kind of leaving too much space. You might get it closer. Again, A and K. I don't read Merve, I see E. So this is an interesting idea, this idea of using the long slash. Especially, I think there's an opportunity here. But, so here's the problem. I'm having a hard time reading the M. The K could also work, but there's a kind of a frustrating thing happening here. And you can solve this very easily by, you are kind of doing it here, but not fully doing it. I think you need to break up those lines. So just try it out if you really like this one. Break up all the lines. So in every time you change an angle, leave an empty space and make sure that the empty space are kind of consistent. They don't always have to be that large, but they can also be. So play with that idea, see how well it's still read, whether it can be read or not. So you can maybe work it out like that. But here's the problem. So you're using this thing fully as a logo, but actually I think you're always thinking of the business card, and that's the problem. Right now we're not thinking of the business card. You should only be thinking of the logo, because you might be using this in different places where you don't write industrial design. So when you don't write industrial designer, then what's gonna happen? Are you going to have this long, thin, unnecessary and meaningless line going down of your logo type, or are you going to cut it up? So that's an important decision to make, because I want you to first work on this, then afterwards in the portfolio, on this cover or on the business cards, you can alternate your logo to become this, but you have to first solve that initial idea. So anyway, all of these appear to be very long things to act as a proper logo to me. So, but then they're closed like that and alone, they don't mean anything. So they definitely need to have all the other letters, but work on them alone without this. That's my suggestion for you. So I feel like there's something missing here. Hatta daha da çok kayboldu birdenbire yaklaştıkça. Okay. So there is something missing here. I couldn't see it. Sorry, there's suddenly a sound there. So let me keep going. Okay, this is not a very new idea. There's even one other student who has this in your section, and something that I've seen a lot. You have, I think, more interesting things on the over here. So even this is more interesting. I think you have a nice thing going on here. I would go with that one, like with the pose if you like, but not that necessarily. So I think accordions are maybe an important thing for you. But the problem is here, I don't see an accordion, I see a fan, yelpaze. So I don't know what to do. Maybe it's just too much to try to change to make your name into that. I don't think that's necessary. I'm guessing that there are some things missing. I don't know. I think the way you created this huge PDF is creating problems. The only thing you needed to do, you needed to have A4 size papers, separate papers now that you're gonna digitize them, so you can have different A4 pages in the Illustrator, and just export them as a PDF or save as a PDF. So I think, if you really want to work with this, you have to work with it a bit more. Right now, these are definitely not working. So okay, you had this one as well. This could work, although right now this has gone so much down that it looks like a weird, like nail or bir saplanacak bir şey gibi duruyor. So it's a bit scary. I think it needs to maybe be cut up where this shape ends. So maybe it's not a circle, but it's an ellipse. It might work much better that way. Could work as well. So you have certain ideas. This is much more interesting than these, by the way. You have certain ideas. They could happen. They could work. I suggest that you pick one that you find the most interesting and the most suitable to your own identity, and keep working on that one. Okay. Good luck.